Hello and welcome to a special edition of The Briefing, bringing you highlights from Monocle Radio's recent reporting trip and pop-up radio studio setup at the World Government Summit in Dubai. I'm Tom Edwards. The WGS took place in early February at the Madinat Jumeirah in Dubai. It's an annual gathering that's become one of the most packed fixtures on the diplomatic calendar, with attendees including presidents, prime ministers and policymakers from all across the globe. This year's edition took place against a backdrop of heightened regional tensions, the arrival of Donald Trump's beautiful armada in Middle Eastern waters highlighting the US president's renewed threats to strike Iran. Meanwhile, trilateral talks involving US, Ukrainian and Russian officials were also unfolding just along the coast in Abu Dhabi. As well as politicians and leaders at the heart of those happenings, Monocle met many other key decision-makers and influential voices across business, economics, culture, design, and plenty more besides. In 3 special programmes, we're going to present a selection of those voices to you. Today, we're focusing on the guests we welcomed on the official opening day of the 2026 World Government Summit. We start with the CEO of global private jet and flight support company JetX, Adel Mardini. Mardini founded the business in Dubai back in 2005. He stopped by Monocle Studios to chat to Tyler Brûlé.
Let's get right into it. We are 1 month into 2026. How's business? How's the start of the year been? And maybe just look back. I mean, we were talking before we went on. We've been through a very interesting time in business aviation. But how do you read the market right now?
Business keep growing, before COVID different than after COVID. So the people who moved from first and business class to fly a private jet, they maintain their habit, I would say, and keep flying private jet. For example, January of this year compared to January last year, we had 12% growth. And this is a big index about what's next coming for our industry.
So talking about 12% growth, obviously you have a regional focus. You're still global, of course, nevertheless. But where do you see that 12%? Can you identify any specific markets where we're seeing an uptick in new passenger growth?
We are a global company. We have 44 airports around the world, and the growth is following the region and the season. These days, the region is Middle East, which is like this. The weather is nice. We have government summit in Dubai. We have a lot of activity here in the region. So this is why we see almost 12% growth in our region in Middle East comparing of last year. And this is for sure based on the economic is happening in UAE, the growth in the region. And for sure, the most important thing, the stability here and the more investor who's coming to the region, and especially to Dubai and Abu Dhabi.
So 44 bases currently. What type of growth are you looking for? And where would you say the focus is when you're looking for new bases?
I see Balkan area is very interesting area because there's a lack of infrastructure for private aviation there. Europe, we are almost in a key destination, London, Paris, Milan, Rome, Barcelona, Malaga, Madrid, all these key destinations as either leisure or business. We are covering this location. JetX is a brand who build not only in aviation, it build on lifestyle as well. So for our who flying with us is not a passenger, he is a guest. So this is what makes us different than any other one. We see a big potential to grow in Asia. This is where we have as well lack of infrastructure we see. In the Middle East, we almost in key destination. We are in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Muscat, Salalah. We are opening in Red Sea in a couple of months. We are very optimistic about the market in the entire region. But overall, I can see Balkan area, Asia, and Africa is where we are going to focus about our next phase of the growth.
So you said just before we went on air, 6 new bases opening this year. What's coming up?
We are opening 6 new destinations this year. Some of them we can announce it, such as Milan, Linate, Red Sea, Casablanca. We are opening a new facility, and for sure, it's another 3 locations. We'll announce it within the coming 2-3 months. But the first opening will be in March. Then we have April, May, so all coming together.
It's interesting. We're sitting, of course, in one of the major hubs of hospitality. You talk about your passengers. They're not passengers. They are guests. We also know that in many corners of the world, in Europe and the US in particular, we have a talent crisis. It is very, very difficult to attract people to work in restaurants, in hotels. In your industry, is it still attractive to, of course, work on board a Challenger, a Gulfstream, whatever the aircraft may be, or not?
It's very interesting question, and this is, to be honest with you, is the biggest challenge now in all the service industry. Because service industry, regardless how much will be on the digitalization or AI, but you're still facing a problem on the services, which is the manpower on the ground. Because our industry is very niche industry, is not aviation, not hospitality, is merged between both. I see a lot of people interested to grow in this niche market. Look, there's thousands of the hotel, there's thousands of retail, but as a private jet terminal globally, we are up to 5 to 6 globally. So still this industry is very niche and very interested for a lot of talent to grow in this very niche industry. So I don't see any challenge in this part. I see people moving and very interested to join us because of this niche industry.
Next up at our studios, Tyler welcomed the President of Estonia, no less, Alar Karis.
Mr. President, wonderful to have you here at the WGS. Maybe we should start with being in the region. I'm curious, of course, we think of what happens with the foreign ministry in Tallinn. Of course, you have a lot of immediate issues in the Baltic, but here we are in the UAE. WGS is obviously becoming a more important event. But we think about the relationship between Estonia and this part of the world. Some bridges to be built, some more investment to be had. Why are you here?
Well, first of all, it's my pleasure to be here. First of all, it's very warm here. It was minus 30 when I left Estonia. But we don't start today our relations. We have relations already quite a while, and our companies are working here, and I do hope it's going more and more. Our not only companies and entrepreneurs, but also cultural events, and we expect also people from this region to visit Estonia as well, because it's not only minus 30 in summer. So it's a nice place as well. So our relations are extremely good now, and we are doing well.
When you talk about companies and what various Estonian sectors have to offer, what are the key areas when you think about, obviously from the private sector, what is the offer that Estonia has to give to the likes of the UAE and the broader Gulf?
It's probably, as I always have to say, it's IT services. So, and it's not only what we provide with services to UAE and to this region, but we also at the same time we learn from you, because we had certain experience already that we assist certain countries, digitalization of governments and so forth. And later on we have to learn from them because they are doing some things much better. So this is how we exchange our ideas, and this is not the exception. So I'm looking really forward to how this AI is going to develop. It's not only digitalization, but AI as well. So this is what the summit is about.
The summit is also about various geopolitical topics as well. You are certainly not immune to those. We've seen a lot of very interesting companies when we talk about the tech sector and the defense tech sector coming out of Estonia as well. Are there interesting conversations on the defense side as well in terms of obviously potential clients here, but also knowledge sharing between the UAE and some of the interesting defense startups out of Estonia?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, the defense startups are growing in Estonia, and we develop our defense industry. And of course, again, AI and digitalization is a matter of using it in this particular industry as well. So we are trying to work together also with people over here. And it's not only, as I said already, it's not a starting point. It's just a continuation of our relation. And of course, defense is important now, and important for Europe. It is important for Estonia. So we are developing it very fast.
You touched on those rather severe temperatures in Estonia. We come out to this region a lot. I've actually bumped into quite a few Estonians working in service here. It's quite an attractive place. It's maybe nice to have a job for a couple of years working for Etihad and Emirates, for example. When you head back to Estonia, are you hoping to also take a few Estonians with you to attract people to come back? I'm not sure. I don't want to say there's a brain drain, but this is a region which is incredibly hot, not just temperature-wise, but in terms of opportunity. So is there sort of also a drive to get talented young Estonians back in the country as well?
Well, sure. I mean, my policy always has been that we send our people out to get an experience, starting from students and later on also with company people, and then to make sure they come back at some point. And we should develop our environment. That it's not a salary question, but we want to come back. And these things happen sometimes, not only during the taking pension out of Estonian system, but much earlier. So, and it's vice versa. I mean, we also expect your people coming over, study in Estonian universities and stay for a while in Estonia.
Time for something a little different next. I was joined by Ben Lamb, the entrepreneur and founder of Colossal, and a former guest on Monocle Radio, I should add, and Majid Al Mansouri, executive director of the Museum of the Future in Dubai. They joined me to tell me what they'd been cooking up together.
We built what we call the World Preservation Lab and BioVault, and this is really about talking how the UAE and the museum, in partnership with Colossal Biosciences, is looking at what the future of conservation is. Historically, there's been many ways where that people have seen conservation. What we want to do in the UAE and what we want to do at the museum is really make sure that we harness technology, we harness artificial intelligence. We see them as tools, and many people see them in a very different way. But we see them as tools is to really make sure that we have a prosperous world that we can all live in. And I think conservation is a very big element of that.
And before we bring Ben in, the Museum of the Future is, well, I'm sure a lot of our listeners, they've probably visited, but just remind us how, because it's the future-focused benchmark, right, in terms of a curated experience.
Absolutely. So Museum of the Future is the only museum in the world that's focused on the future, very much like in the spirit of the UAE and Dubai. We really look at forward. We're really forward-thinking, and based on His Highness's vision, it's really a future that's based on hope. We don't forget the challenges. We know there are a lot of challenges. In this instance, we're talking about loss of ecosystems or loss of species. But then we look at kind of finding solutions in a hopeful manner. So when you go to the museum, you really see a future that's 50 years from now. I think with this experience, we're seeing something that could happen in the near future, and that's kind of how we go from just imagining in the future to actually doing something.
Well, with an amazing mission statement like that, Ben, I can see why you guys are natural bedfellows, right?
Oh, natural.
It had to happen.
It had to. Like, yeah, it's like they are literally, the museum is just way more than a museum, right? It's a living lab, and for us, Colossal is so exciting to kids and parents and teachers, right? And so for us, our vision, like when we wanted to roll out and say, okay, who do we go partner with on our world's first BioVault? Nothing ever like this has existed, right? There's been lots of biobanking and lots of different initiatives at some zoos and at some academic labs, but there hasn't been this kind of concerted effort where you put this amount of technology, vision, and capital behind a really big project to save species. And so there's no other partner that really than when we started talking around the world, like Dubai and like the UAE, and then specifically at the Museum of the Future, because our vision wasn't we didn't want to go build some BioVault, put it, even though it had the greatest technologies and it did everything we wanted from a species preservation perspective, and kind of built this Noah's Ark 2.0, but then just put it in some government building that no one sees, right? We wanted to put it on display. We wanted to make citizen scientists. We wanted it to be a working, living lab in the museum, so that like we can bring kids in and bring parents in, because we found that this idea of hope through de-extinction and new technologies for conservation really is inspiring, and people get really excited about it. And so this is the first place where people can engage with that type of content, but also see real scientists, both Emirati and U.S. Colossal scientists, working together to save species in real time while wrapping it in education. And if you see this incredible mini experience that Majid and his incredible team built, you will see like just a glimmer of it. Like it's better than any museum. This little thing here is better than any museum exhibit that you'll see, which is amazing. And so imagine that when it's a living lab and we're preserving actual species. We're very, very excited.
It strikes me that you're both in different ways, but you're both in the impossible business, right? I mean that as a deep compliment.
When Colossal was founded, so they spoke about the extinction of the woolly mammoth, and half of the people didn't believe that until they actually de-extinct the dire wolves. But then we said, okay, well, how can we take that in the next step? How can we use the de-extinction toolkit for conservation? Because we have a prosperous, let's say, environment here. Many people think, it's just a desert and there's no species. Well, we do have the Arabian leopards, we have, the hawksbill turtle, which is kind of come and base in our region. We have a very diverse set of kind of species in our region, and we want to make sure that we show the model of how we can conserve them, but also really make it a reality. So the best thing after, doing the extinction is to make sure that animals don't get extinct.
Right, in the first place. Well, this is it, and it's interesting. It strikes me, and I know, Ben, when you spoke on Monocle Radio before, I think you talked a little bit to one of my colleagues about this, which is the critical importance of inspiring, especially the younger generation, with positive storytelling. I mean, one of the problems about addressing something as urgent even as the climate crisis is it's doom and gloom. Why try harder? This is the agenda of the Museum of the Future. It's the agenda of your business. You've got to inspire.
It's terrifying, right? Like, I spoke at the Aspen Ideas Festival last year, and I sat through this panel, and it said that in the 24-hour news cycle with preaching doom and gloom, it's not inspiring kids to get off the couch and do something. They're actually just saying, oh, that's hopeless. They're only migrating to challenges where they actually see hope. Like, that is what's happening to our youth, right? And that's what every single clinical psychologist and cognitive psychologist is telling us. So it's terrifying, right? And so I think that we have to be realistic, right? Like, we live in a world, like, we're in this building that has AC, and we're in the building with AC, right? We have modern technology. We have modern,
I think this is why people like to come to talk to us.
Yeah. I'll spend a lot of time in this room if you want. But ultimately, we have to figure out how we out-innovate the take, because modern conservation works, but it doesn't work at the speed of which we are taking from the land, taking from nature, and changing the environment and changing ecosystems. And so the only way, we have to vastly change everything that we're going to do, and I don't see humankind doing that. So we have to out-innovate it. That's what we have to do. And so, I would love to just say that we don't need biovaults, because everybody's just going to change their consumer behavior. But the reality is, we're going to lose up to 50% of biodiversity in the next 25 years. And so we are not doing enough from an innovation and technology perspective. So we need a backup plan. And so our view is this biovault serves as a backup plan, right? Because it's better, I think, to have a backup plan than just no plan at all, while we're innovating to change in the ratio of the take from nature.
Keeping things sharp, as always on Monocle Radio. Our Tyler Brulé was joined next by the CEO of Hugo Boss, Daniel Grieder.
Maybe just capture for us 2025, the world of Boss. How are things evolving? How has it evolved?
We are doing great. And that's good. We have achieved a lot. Also, when you remember our strategy that we put in place, Claim 5, we have actually reached our results 2 years earlier. That is great. But what we want to do is now going from great to excellence. And we are here in Dubai. And when you see here the country, that's where you can learn going from great to excellence, because that's what they do every day.
And just before we went on air, we were talking about energy, and it's an ongoing theme in Monocle, where we talk about Europe needing to get back to work, and we sort of scratch our heads, say, oh, why aren't things working in Europe? And you come here, as we just said, and it smacks you in the face in the best possible way. Things are moving.
Oh my God. I was yesterday, this is an example of how people discuss, then they decide, and then they do. Right? And sometimes in Europe you think, or in our country, you have the impression that it's only discuss, and again discuss, and no decisions. And here it moves from a day. I had the pleasure yesterday with our partner from Alpha Time, I had a meeting with them, and I was impressed how many projects this company, it's a multi-billion company, how many projects they run next to each other. And nothing is too much. Everything can be done. Everything can be done tomorrow. It's wonderful.
And with Alpha-Tainment, it's also, they're dealing with the complexity of lots of different brands all over the world, different speeds, different, let's say, working cultures, and yet they make it happen.
Yeah, and that's this is fascinating. It gives you so much energy, and I think you see how the country is run by His Highness. It's an example of running a country. How can parties always go against? Here it's driven like a CEO is running the country, and has a clear strategy, and everybody's following the strategy. I think that's what we should do in Europe, and in any business you can only learn how fast they do it, how well they get involved in it, how much they gather information, how much they study it, and then execute, but faster than everything I have seen before.
You happen to, of course, be sitting outside of, and you're in the middle of the industrial heartland, or at least one industrial heartland of Germany. Okay, we've seen a little bit of an economic uptick in the Federal Republic again, but what is your take? What is Daniel Grieder's take on the state of Germany? And I don't know if you've got 3 fixes, which are the 3 Ds: discuss, decide, and do. They would certainly need that in Germany. But beyond that, what else would you say?
Yeah, I think the biggest problem is the bureaucracy. And I just would say we all have to kill bureaucracy. It just makes us slow. I mean, we talk about 3 days workplace, instead of this should not be. We should deliver. It doesn't matter how many days it takes, but we talk about and we lose time about going from 5 to 3 days, and how can we get from 3 days to 4? It's ridiculous. I think we have to move. We have to think more entrepreneurial. We have to trust more to each other, and we just have to make things happen. It's like, what is the plan to move from A to B, and let's go and kill everything, all this bureaucracy that is on that way. We have to kill, because it doesn't make us efficient, and we have to get more efficient.
You just said that this is one of your most successful stores or it is the most successful store per square meter here in Dubai. I'm curious, how do we, because Monocle's also in the business of retail as well, how do we make retail, being on the shop floor, still attractive?
I think when I see, and I went to all the shopping malls, it's not just a place of a point of sale. It's a point of experience. It's a point of service. Nothing is too much. I, for example, had a wrong size. I realized in the hotel room, I called the store and said, listen, how can I do this? Can I bring Daniel? No problem. What size do you want? 50? Okay, it's in your hotel in 2 hours, and just exchange. Bring us your.
Yeah, but you're the big boss. Come on.
No.
I would hope so, right?
No. That was another store.
Aha.
I was another.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So we didn't. Okay.
That was not ours.
Okay. This I would get.
Yeah. It's how the people are minded here. It's service minded,
Sure.
and experience. And I think that is retail. It should be not just a point of sales. It's a point of experience. You have to think beyond. You have to give the customer, the end consumer, a reason to come into the shopping mall or into the store, and then make it an experience. And that's what I have seen here. I'm here for 4 days, and I have seen everything. Restaurants, even in the washrooms. You go there, how clean it is, how service-minded it is. It's beautiful. It's a blueprint for the world.
It is.
Yep.
Absolutely. Tell us, we look ahead across 2026. What are the big stories and themes for Boss?
So we are going now into phase 2. Touchdown claim 5 is phase 1, and we have achieved the top line. And now we go into phase 2, where it is more about efficiency. So it's more about profitability, and but always in an excellent way. So we call it claim 5 touchdown, and that's we have to. We grew very fast, and when you grow fast, you also have to. I'm always explaining it. You get some fat, and you just have to change the fat into muscles. And that's what we now do, and use the next 12 months to clean up where we have to clean up, improve where we have to improve, and continue on our long-term view to get brand equity, to still grow, and to get efficient and profitable in a sustainable way.
Next up on this special edition of the programme, let's hear from Rustin Sotude, founder and CEO of High Ground, who joined me to talk about the future, not of government, but of gaming.
Gaming is such a rich culture, but the challenge that it experiences is that one of accessibility. I think when people look at video games in the community, it's something that they think is interesting, but they don't know how to get into it. And I have found just through my own business and through my own work that if you make something beautiful, it's a universal language. People are going to want to come and check it out and take a look at it. And so I figured that if we can create really interesting products, that'll draw someone into the culture of video games, and they get to see, oh, this is an art. This is a community. It's not just entertainment. And so that's really like what I hope to accomplish throughout my career. And being here at the World Government Summit, there was such an interesting question that they asked, which is, what is gaming's role in governance? Like, these are the kind of questions that were being asked here, but in America or other places that have spoken, that's not really a part of the discussion. So I thought that was fascinating that that's the kind of things that they're thinking about.
Well, and there is a receptiveness in this market to new ideas, or looking at traditional markets with real, genuinely fresh perspective, which clearly has struck a chord with you. Talk to me a bit about this sort of premiumification of it, because I think it's interesting. I think High Ground's been very successful at doing that. What gave you the confidence or the conviction that actually the marketplace was ready for something that was more premium, more considered, those values that you mentioned? Because I guess a lot of people would still have said, well, hang on, no, this is more of it's a mass market audience play. Sure, sometimes these things are expensive, but you can't premiumize this space. What was it that gave you that conviction that you absolutely could do that?
That's a great question. I'm smiling because it wasn't that academic or intellectual at the beginning. It was just me being like, man, I think video games are cool. How come other people don't think it's cool? And then that started to resonate with like a community of gamers, because they felt the same way. They felt marginalized to a certain extent, that their identity is something that people see as like, oh, it's antisocial, or there's not a community or culture there. So that's how it started. And I remember we formed a community of gamers that we call hype geeks. They're basically like hype beast gamers or cool gamers. We were surveying these guys, and one kid was talking about his keyboards in the same way that someone would talk about sneakers. He's like, oh, I go to KeyCon, which is just like SneakerCon, but it's for keyboards. People resell them, they collect them, they do all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, cool. Okay, well, like, what are the cool brands? And when you go and look into it, it was like you could buy a black keyboard or a white keyboard. But no one was really building brand storytelling, creating narratives, graphics. And so I thought, oh, wow, this is like, you know, I love fashion as well. I see this happening in the fashion world. Why is this not happening in video games? And so that was sort of the impetus for how we started High Ground. And then it really just scaled from there. We make gaming keyboards and mice, but we market them like collectibles.
And you've now sold the business, and your career sort of continues apace. I think one thing I find interesting about this space is it's a bit like the conversation we have around AI. It's the pace of technical progress is pretty rapid. If you're making a product in this really deliberate, thoughtful way, design-led, premium materials, presumably that takes longer than just churning something out. Is there a risk, or was there a risk during the kind of the development of your brand, that you kind of get overtaken by developments even whilst you're still in development phase, or does it not quite work like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always a risk when you're running a product-led business, right? It's like you look around at the landscape, and at the same time you try and not look around at the landscape. That's the balance that we kind of run in this business, especially with our timelines being so long. We have to really think about like, okay, well, what are the features that we want to introduce that are different, but that they're not so different that it doesn't resonate with people? And I think what we found through our work is we take a lot of cues out of fashion, honestly, in the design world. And that has always been our strength. But admittedly, it's also been a weakness for us in terms of our engineering ability. When I sold that business, we sold it to 100 Thieves. It's the world's most valuable esports organization. And I think the challenge that we experienced, and 100 Thieves also experienced, is how do you balance creativity and being commercial and generating money at the same time? I think a lot of businesses experience this. We were no different. And so I think sometimes we made some decisions along the way that, if we were a bit more focused on the long term, we wouldn't have made those mistakes. But everything's a learning experience. I think everyone at 100 Thieves would agree as well.
The potential of the digital realm was also a theme I covered with Germany's Minister for Digital Transformation, Carsten Wildberger.
Well, I think here at this massive conference, it's fantastic to meet many people, to see also how digitization, AI is being used in governmental services. Is also to understand different trends, how to modernize government, state services. And it's a forum where you can meet companies and also strengthen the relationship with the UAE, which is very important to Germany.
Now, Tommy, you worked in business, of course, for many years as well. Tell me a little bit about the learnings moving between these worlds, the public and private, because sometimes we say, it's incumbent on business to drive the agenda, especially with tech. Other times government, particularly if we think about regulation, has to take the lead. Do you wear both of those coats equally lightly? How challenging is that to move between those worlds?
Of course, the worlds are very different. The system is very different. But like in business, if you have a goal and a plan, what you want to execute. So the way I work is, what do I want to achieve in the next 2-3 years or in this legislation? And I have to work my way backwards, given the system. So how do I execute, given how the system works, the decision-making process? And the way we work is, we actually work in projects. So the whole ministry is embracing big projects that scale, from bringing digital services to more municipalities, automating many of the approval processes in government using agentic AI. So all of those things in terms of project management, we try to adopt in politics, but at the same time, of course, the decision-making process is different, but that's also fun.
Fun, that wasn't the word I was expecting. How nimble is it though? Because I think we have a problem obviously in the UK where I live with sometimes bureaucracy being a little cumbersome, a bit clunky, not super adaptable. I guess these new tools enable that kind of dexterity, right?
Well, the role of the ministry is threefold. One big role is, we call it government modernization, and that is about cutting bureaucracy, making life easier again for citizens, for business, and cutting red tape. That is a slow process, albeit we are making actually good progress. We have, for the first time, I would say in 20 years, a plan that is well structured and also committed. We have an alignment on the federal side and the states. And now we're working our way through all the things that we promised. And that decision-making process takes time, but it's a very well-structured approach. And we're also changing the approach because, for instance, we have cabinet meetings that is only devoted to cutting bureaucracy. So it's the first time. I wish that we accelerate along the way, but that's one role. The other one is the digitization of government, the public service. And the third area is how do we use digitization and AI to increase innovation for our companies and to stimulate growth. But cutting bureaucracy, making us faster is one of the key things. And we have had already in the first 9 months some great successes. So we're translating the effect into euro savings of what we call bureaucracy costs. What we've put in the pipeline is worth 8 billion euros. Much more to come, but it's a good start.
Pretty good. Let me ask you about the public appetite and whether that keeps pace, because I think business can demonstrate this adaptability. You're delivering it in government. You've got the numbers, as you just said, to show. Is the public keeping pace? It's funny, there's such an appetite for doing here in UAE. People are working so hard. One problem in Europe that some people might point out is the appetite for that kind of work. People are looking at, should we be looking at a 4-day week or a 3-day week? Is that out of step with the pace of change and the appetite for change, do you think?
I think what's happening at the moment, technology and the rate of change is happening at such a speed that it's hard for people and a social system to adapt. My concern is, by getting stuck just in the conversation, should we do it or do not, we're missing out on growth, we're missing out on innovation, and that is the worst of all outcomes. So the way I like to think about it, first, we need to embrace the technology. We need to master it. We should also have the ambition to not just follow, at some point lead, even though I know there's a lot of ground to be made. And the second conversation we need to have, in parallel, how are we dealing with the consequences? And what I'm experiencing at the moment, it looks like technology is always at least one step ahead, but we need to find the right answers. And I'm not downplaying the second question, how do we deal with the social, consequences, the ability to adapt, because that means all of us, we have to change the way we work. We have to learn lifelong. There are jobs where machines will be better at. At the same time, it allows us to also have more growth. It allows us also to refocus on things that matter more, because by let the machines deal with the complexity or with things that we don't like to do. So we have to work in both worlds. And I think Europe has to wake up and embrace really fully innovation.
Another change of pace and tone next. I was very fortunate to be joined at Monocle Radio's studios by my colleague and Monocle's golf correspondent, Inzamam Rashid. Inzi and I were treated to, well, it really was an audience with His Excellency Dr. Anwar Gargash, a key figure in Emirati public life, and for 13 years the UAE's Minister of State for Foreign Affairs.
I believe that for you to be a convener, you have to do several things. You have to have a network of relations. You have to have content, so people come and want to hear about various things, etc. The idea, I think, came up many years ago that not only private sector has to congregate, but it's important also that governments also congregate and at the same time learn from each other about opportunities, missteps, successes, etc. I think the third important thing also is you keep doing this over the years, because building an institution needs repetition. And so I think what we see today in terms of good conversations, in terms of people who are coming, who everybody wants to meet, is about also building an institution. Now, the attractiveness here is also, if you're diligent, you get like 2 months or 3 months worth of meetings in 2-3 days, because you could actually do that.
Your Excellency, you mentioned conversations there, and obviously this summit in particular makes conversations very much possible. Just this morning I was seeing the president of Estonia have a sideline conversation with the Prime Minister of Latvia, for example. But conversations is very much at the heart of how the UAE does diplomacy. I want to touch on the last week in particular. You've been very busy bringing together 3 countries that haven't yet had a meeting until Abu Dhabi did this last week, the United States, Ukraine and Russia, for the most crucial trilateral conversations. I just want to get into and understand how the UAE managed to do that and how those conversations have gone.
Good question and interesting one. And I think to start with, when Russia invaded Ukraine, we took a position to be on the side of international law, but at the same time, in terms of various international fora, etc. But I think at the same time, we took also a position not to take sides, to maintain our relations with Ukraine and to maintain our relations with Russia. At the time, I remember checking the numbers, we had about 20,000 Russian residents in the UAE and about 16,000 Ukrainians. So we took measures like basically extending residencies for Ukrainians who were going through a crisis, etc. And, we were criticized heavily for doing that because everybody wanted us to take sides. Why are you doing this? How come you are on Russia's side, etc.? And I think our argument stood. The argument was very clear that what we really want to do is we want to be helpful, not rather than be just a number. So I think as what people expected would be short-term crisis extended, I think the good offices of the UAE started in some of the humanitarian work. We actually managed to sign a free trade agreement with both Russia and Ukraine during the war last year.
So then can I?
But if you just allow me,
please.
And then we did a lot of prisoner exchanges between Russia and Ukraine. About I think over 3,000 prisoners from both sides were exchanged. It created a certain what I would call positive feeling about the UAE and about it being a sort of neutral venue. I think what happened later is we had a shift also in the American policy from the Biden administration to the Trump administration towards Ukraine. So clearly here the Americans had a different approach here, and they also are very confident of the UAE's credibility. So you really had the 3 parties here. You had the Russians who believe that the UAE is a facilitator, the Ukrainians who were happy at the UAE being a facilitator, and the Americans who wanted that to happen. So I think this is an important part where you're being seen as neutral, you have enough distance from this party and that party, and the most important thing also, the Americans feel that this is also a place that this sort of conversation can continue. And as we know, part 2 is coming up in a few days.
I mean, that's the point. The UAE has held talks between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and
Yes.
we've seen that the 2 world leaders there shake hands in Abu Dhabi. Part 2 is coming up. What insight can you give us in what happened in part 1 and what's expected in part 2? Because again, it's pretty unprecedented to have these 3 countries around the same table under one roof.
Well, I think you first of all is you build your relationships, and these relationships are not built overnight. So clearly, when you speak, for example, to the president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, you've already built a relationship over the years, a relationship of mutual respect, sometimes investments, and so on and so forth. So when the time comes, you have, in my opinion, enough credit for you to play that role. This is not something that you could do overnight. And I think from this perspective also, the UAE also is not a major power. So it gives enough comfort for also these congregating groups to come in and consider this as a role where you are actually a facilitator. And I think that is an important part here. The other thing, of course, is the UAE is not an unknown quantity. A lot of these visitors, officials, etc., have been here on business, holiday, know the country, their kids know the country, etc. So I think you have a sort of brand, and that brand also plays an important part in this.
Now, I'm excited to bring you this next highlight on the programme. When assessing the impact of the World Government Summit, there's probably no one better placed to gauge it than Mohammed Al-Shahan himself, the Managing Director of the World Government Summit organisation at the UAE Prime Minister's office. He spoke to Monocle's Editor-in-Chief, Andrew Tuck.
The government summit has been growing year after year, and we have seen exponential growth over the last couple of years. Let me give you some numbers and let's compare these numbers. Last year we had 27 presidents and prime ministers coming to the summit. If you look at the numbers today, we just had the confirmation of the 47th president and the prime minister to come and participate at the World Government Summit. This is by itself affirms the positioning and the credibility of the UAE as a platform. Today, the UAE has always been a convener, and this summit enables that convening power of the UAE by having everyone from every single part around the world to come, participate, speak, discuss challenges, and look for opportunities of the future.
What's interesting is the people speaking here are across a political spectrum. Many people are interested in business and maybe elsewhere in the world that they would perhaps have more crosswords with each other, or they would bring out their grievances. There's something about the way that you run this, maybe using Emirati culture, the notion of the majlis, this idea of sitting down and listening to other people. It's a really interesting event because you get to hear what everybody thinks, and maybe you don't agree with everybody, but it's done in an extraordinarily respectful way. Do you think that's another appeal about WGS at this time?
I think the positioning today of the World Government Summit becoming one of the largest, I would say, non-political platforms for governments is what makes it appealing for governments. You look at these governments, they go to different platforms, different conferences, but the conversation is always political, Andrew. Here at the summit, you will see most of the conversations. It looks at how a government should operate in the future, how a government should utilize AI, how can we improve government services or healthcare services or healthcare systems. I think the positivity and the positive look at the future from the government lens is what made people come and decide to come to the World Government Summit. The other aspect, I think, is the neutrality and the availability of the platform for everyone. Look at the people who are coming here to speak. They represent almost every single part of the world and every single sector of the world. Where would you see someone from, like a CEO of a big Chinese tech giant speaking in a panel after an American tech giant after each other? I think that's the power of Dubai, convening everyone in a very neutral way that really pushes the messages of what matters to the future of governance and government services.
And tell me, for Dubai, what's the significance of this event? Because it certainly puts you on the map, and we've been seeing just in recent days within the greater region, within the UAE, for example, the hosting of talks between Russia and Ukraine, that you are increasingly a convener of conversation and the power of conversation. In fact, there were a couple of panels this morning literally about the need to talk to each other, put down our phones and engage. What does it do for Dubai, WGS?
If you look at Dubai, it has always been the hub. Look at some of the great innovations of this nation. Let's take Emirates, for example. Emirates made Dubai a hub for tourism, for aviation, for people to move from two parts of the world through Dubai. Look at DP World, for example. DP World also made the UAE a convener for logistics, global trade. Today, 10% of global trade goes through the network that's managed by DP World. So this is just a continuation of what Dubai and the UAE has been doing over the years. If we look back in history as well, you would see evidence of Dubai being a convener of trade between the Indians and the Egyptians. And there is an artifact site not too far from here that proves that Dubai has always been the land for people to come and meet and convene. The summit today embodies that spirit of Dubai and the UAE as a convener. I think the other aspect is the diversity of the people that are coming. So you will see the Prime Minister of Spain, while also seeing the Prime Minister of Commonwealth Dominica and some of the island states in the Caribbean, but at the same time some leaders from Africa and Eastern Europe, China, Southeast Asia. They are all here regardless to any geopolitical tensions or untrust between different nations or different geographies, just for one mission to think about the future. How can we have a dialogue that leads to some impactful conversations following the World Government Summit?
I know from organising events with Monocle, when we have like maybe 25 speakers coming in, what a stress it is. And I know the logistics that go into that. You've got nearly 40 prime ministers and presidents, all needing hotel rooms, all with entourages, all special needs, planes coming in at every hour of the day. How stressful is it running the logistics for all of that?
Well, it is very stressful. So if you look at my Whoop numbers now, I think it will be in the red zone, but I don't want even to look. But the good thing about the World Government Summit, everyone feels that they are part of the summit. And whenever they come, next year, they all want to provide the support, to extend the support. So the whole UAE becomes the World Government Summit team. I'm privileged enough to have the UAE leadership behind supporting the summit by inviting the leaders to come to the UAE, most of the UAE agencies. Maybe one thing to add, and I think that's not something that everyone would know, the World Government Summit, from a financial point of view, is fully supported through a corporate membership program. And that's what made the summit also being embraced by those members who are part of our community. So if Google, for example, is a member, they feel that they are part of the success of this organization. And it applies to all the other members. Today we have 61 members from all over the world. And without the support of those members, the summit would have never grown to what it is today.
Day one was certainly a busy one at Monocle Studios at the World Government Summit, and we're not quite done yet. Design and technology was on the agenda next, as Sefsan Ozcan, Vice President and Design Director of Concepts for Nike, was the next to stop by to chat to me at the radio booth.
We have a huge resource department, the Nike Sport Research Lab. We have scientists, engineers, a huge design team, and everything that we do goes into figuring out a way of performing whatever you perform a little bit better, which is why it becomes really important to be able to articulate and help everyone understand what those little changes make impacts in your improvement.
That's this kind of marginal gain idea, right? We see from any number of frontline sports.
Absolutely.
It's really interesting. Nike's obviously, it's really interesting. I think it had a bit of a rough time on a sort of super corporate level, change of leadership at the top. And there's this feeling now, certainly from the outside looking in, certainly to Portland where you are, that, you know, it's kind of back with those foundational values again. I don't know, you've been there a while. Does it feel a bit like that? Or do you not actually feel those changes in the same way at the front, on the front line?
There's definitely a change in approach. If a leadership approach changes, you feel it. I'm going to stick to my personal perspective, as I was an athlete before I was a designer at an amateur level. I played basketball, I still run, I joined marathons, and I participate in a lot of sports. First and foremost, I believe that sport makes you a better person. Physical activity makes you a better person. No matter what we do, no matter what changes happens in the company, in my mind, my goal is to have other people start doing physical activity, or if they're doing it, help them improve it, help them do more, and build a better connection between their mind and their body, and be just a little bit better person. So, of course, there's changes. And I think we have a good momentum right now. But I think it's also really important as an individual to, no matter what, stick to your core values. And in this case, I feel like I'm lucky to work at a place where my values align with my company's values.
Yeah, that's super important. Just on the design side, I was always a bit of a kind of sneaker freak when I was a kid. And my favorite shoe designer was Tinker Hatfield, of course, a legend of the Pacific Northwest and within Nike. Are you allowed to choose favorites? Do you have one? Is it like Jordan 1 or whatever? Are you not allowed to choose?
Oh, I mean, I'm sure I'm allowed to choose.
But you can't choose.
I'm the worst person to ask. I'm a hoarder of good design, and whether it's shoes or anything.
What about just any design item then? What was something? Was there something, even though, I don't know, as a kid you were like, I'm going to be the guy that designs stuff like that? Can you think of anything?
It's funny. I drove shoes and cars, and I'm lucky enough to be associated a little bit in both of those territories. So I guess shoes it is. I'd say it always changes. What I appreciate in a shoe is less the cultural currency or how much it sells for in a second market. I like the product that finds a new perspective and tries something different and is trying to do something that's never been done before. Whether it's successful or failure, it's the attempt that makes me excited.
It's like Evel Knievel. So what are you doing at WGS? Tell me a little bit about who you've been talking to and what the narrative has been.
It's funny. I'm here because of His Excellency Omar Sultan Al Alama. Lucky to call him a friend, and actually met him outside of work context and over a shared interest in cars and design. And then he invited me here. He said, you should come see what's going on here. We're trying to achieve. And I find it mind-blowing how open-minded, how futuristic, and how visionary they are, and how they're looking at their city as a platform for incubating new ideas.
Now, one of my favourite conversations of the whole week featured my good colleague, Andrew Tuck. We were lucky enough to be joined around the mics by the inventor of FOMO. Yes, that's right, you heard what I said. The excellent US venture capitalist and author, Patrick J. McGuinness.
Patrick, let's start with the fact that you invented this term, fear of missing out, FOMO. And some people might say, is that really true? But Google it, guys, because everybody seems to agree that you actually came up with this term. Just tell us where and when you invented the term and why it got this kind of global traction.
What I like to do, Andrew, is I ask ChatGPT just to be very 2026 about it. But I invented the word when I was a student at Harvard Business School. I arrived there shortly after 9/11, and having experienced that in New York City at the time, I just remember thinking I've got to live every day like it's my last. Carpe diem mindset. And Harvard Business School is an incredibly choice-rich environment. I went to every class, every job interview, every party. And at some point I realized all of that opportunity was making me anxious and I wasn't enjoying it. And I realized that me and all of my classmates had a fear of missing out. I shortened it to FOMO, wrote an article in the school newspaper back in 2004, first time that FOMO was ever used. And then, I moved on with my life. And then years later, journalists found me. He had traced it back to me, and, the rest is history.
And just before Tom dives in, it's become a useful tool in a way, because you're here speaking at World Government Summit about this very notion of FOMO. Now, we probably think about it, worried that there's a cool party we should be at, or that that we're eating in the wrong restaurant. But you've elevated that to talk about how it impacts government, what that means if you're a huge institution. If you also somehow end up responding to this same feeling, especially when it comes to things like AI and technology and societal change, sum up for us what you've been trying to explain to people here today.
Yeah, I mean, it is something that we think of as frivolous, but over the last decade and a half, I've spent a lot of time studying FOMO and talking to big decision makers in business, in finance, in marketing, and in government. And what I have seen is that this is deeply embedded in our psychology. And as a result, when people feel FOMO, even though they may not recognize it, what happens is they see an urgent opportunity in a time of uncertainty and they feel like they've got to move quickly. And the easiest way to move quickly is to copy somebody or do something that is not very well thought out. And so as a result, policies are put in place that don't work or are copying other people that aren't relevant to your particular situation. And you end up having a situation that is suboptimal and oftentimes wastes money, time, and costs legitimacy.
Well, this is what I find amazing about the FOMO concept, is that you can kind of get it when you think about that undergrad, putting down this feeling that, what's happening around the corner. But what you're saying is this can do serious, deep, long-term structural damage on a governmental, on an international level. We need to ask more questions like, how does that manifest itself, and what is the jeopardy if you make decisions based on a faulty FOMO mindset?
So there are a couple of very recent examples that I think are quite powerful. The first is policymaking under COVID. The response of stimulus programs, like we've got to get everybody the opportunity to get checks in their pockets. And yeah, of course, it's a good idea to support an economy at a time of change, but this was done in a very hurried fashion. Countries started copying each other. The checks were sent out without a plan in place, without accountability. And then years later, we look back, where did that money go, right? And we are living with the consequences. When we look at AI, I think the US is a very interesting example. This is what I talked about this morning. The federal government, our president, Donald Trump, believes that very light regulation is critical to beating China. He has what I call FOMI, fear of missing out on AI, in the battle with China, right? At the same time, you have states like California that are ideologically quite different from the federal government that are much more worried about safety. And so their FOMO is around protecting users. So you end up having a lack of conversation, a lack of a strategic framework around this very important regulation. And then you add in the money of the lobbyists. And so all the politicians have a different type of FOMO, which is where do I get the cash? And you end up with a lack of really evidence-based policy, which is, of course, what we all want.
And finally, on this special edition of the show, I wrapped up day one with a guest from back home in the UK, Ian Murray MP, UK Minister of State jointly in the Department for Culture, Media and Sport and the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology.
The government here obviously works completely differently from the government in the UK. In fact, the previous excellency I was just with about modernising government and data and AI was bemoaning the fact that he meets hundreds of UK ministers because they change all the time, and he was referring to post-2024 general election. So I've assured him that we have some stability and we want to take these things forward. And actually the serious side to all that is they want to do stuff with the UK. They see the UK as being a trusted partner. They see the UK as being well ahead on AI and technology and the ethics and the design of it, maybe even more than the US and China, so a good counterbalance to that. We've also got the cultural linkages that are in there as well. So it's about working together. So primarily I'm here to redevelop those relationships, to reset the relationship because it's had a little bit of a rocky time, and really just to say to the Emiratis that we want to work together, whether it be on culture, whether it be on tech, whether it be on AI. The things that we do well together are much better for us to work together than not.
Is it easier to have that conversation in sometimes here than at home? Because, there's a feeling a little bit, current administration or just Britain a little bit, not in the doldrums, but feeling a bit of a lag, feeling a bit tired, there's a bit of a lack of inspiration. Is there a more ready audience? Is it a more constructive conversation to have here at the moment a little bit?
Actually, I think when you talk about the doldrums in that sense, in the sense of your question, it's probably from our perspective because they don't see it like that in other countries. They see the UK as being something that's driving forward. In fact, one of the ministers this morning was telling me how he visits London once a year during August. He does all the theatres, he does all the tourist attractions. He knows London better than most Londoners in terms of where all the great restaurants and all that are. And he's very up on London. He says, I don't understand the narrative that comes out that London's in the doldrums in the UK. So maybe it's an internal one that we need to learn from, be much more positive about the country and the opportunities. And every single conversation we have, and I think this is really critical, with anybody over here, they talk about their visits to the UK, they talk about being educated in the UK, they talk about playing golf at Gleneagles and St Andrews. There's a real cultural connection there that I don't think we exploit enough. If we were, the Americans, for example, would be puffing our chests out and celebrating it up and down the hallways here, playing a trombone with a brass band. But no, we're very coy about it and we're very shy about it. But actually, those cultural connections and historic connections are very strong, and we should be exploiting those for the benefit of both countries.
Well, let's interrogate that a bit more detail then. Part of your sort of purview now is to push that cultural soft power agenda. I agree with you. I think we underestimate what we have at our disposal, particularly with the creative industries. Tell me a little bit about what are some of the ways that you're going to do that, even if it's to preach to the choir back home a little bit. How are you going to do that, Ian?
Well, I mean, soft power is a big one for us. Cultural diplomacy is huge. And, I say this a lot, but there's not a country in the world that wouldn't give the right arm for a fraction of the cultural and creative industries we've got in the UK. And I'm not quite sure we celebrate them enough. So the Prime Minister set that really strong direction for the new government that we're going to stick by the 8 industrial sectors that we do well, one of them being the creative industries. We're going to try and build and develop them. And of course, the key part of that is both the cultural diplomatic side of it, but exporting. And it's great because it's the English language, it's our music, it's our film and television heritage. And when you're counterbalanced with what's happening in the States, and particularly in the west coast of America in terms of their creative industries, we've got a real opportunity as the UK to really exploit those. And wherever you go, people want to ask you who your football team is. They're Man United fans here. Man City, of course, they own Man City, they're Aston Villa fans, they're Chelsea fans, and that's what they want to talk about. The power of that kind of soft power is huge for us, and we do need to try and exploit it a bit more. So my role here is to make sure we can grow the creative industries in the UK, and really growing that means exports, and growing that means using our creative industries as a real lever for that soft power.
And that brings us to the end of this special edition of The Briefing here on Monocle Radio, featuring highlights from our reporting and pop-up studios at the 2026 World Government Summit in Dubai. This programme was produced and edited by Sam Impey. I'm Tom Edwards. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.